A very good evening and welcome to Kivumbi 2022. This is the first edition, the month of December 2021. And of course, we promise nothing but the best in the next coming weeks. And this is the nerve center of all our operations, whether it's TV, online, or even the newspapers. This is where you get everything from TV to your screens, and of course the newspapers every single morning. And our team right here is working on you tomorrow's news today, because we give you nothing but the best. The Bold newspaper, that is the standard, because only the bold speak the truth. A very good evening and welcome to Kivumbi 2022 once more, and it's time to talk about what matters to you. Next year's general election is just about the corner, with about 246 days left to the next election. And tonight, a disintegrated process with players pulling in different directions. The key player, most valuable player in that team, that is the IBC, has pulled a fast, withdrawing from a multi-sectoral committee that is mandated with overseeing a credible election next year. So many reasons have been given, and notwithstanding, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has no doubt cast a bad light on that committee. While the intentions remain noble, so many questions abound. Now, this committee was to be chaired by the Chief Justice, Martha Koome. Other members include the Inspector General of the Police and 2 cabinet members, and of course the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, plus others that we'll be telling you about. Here is where the problem for some begins. The feeling that neutrality would not be observed is palpable among many, especially the politicians and the political class. So is this composition by default or by design? And does the IBC have a point? What of the political players in this team? Now tonight we delve into the terms of reference of this committee and why all parties must be heard. I will be on the data on this screen tonight, where we'll break down the composition of that committee and tell you why there are jitters. Later on, I will sit down with a panel of interested parties as we attempt to clear the air and identify where the buck stops. I will be speaking to former ECK Commissioner Jack Tumwa, Suba Churchill, the National Coordinator for the National Civil Society Congress, and of course there's John Kagushia, who is the Speaker of the Nyeri County Assembly. Look out for our news headlines in the next few, and of course the top stories at 9 p.m. I'll be sitting in for Akisa Wandera, who is away. But first, let's talk to Eric Latif. Eric.
Thank you very much, Ken, and good evening. There are so many grey areas in law. This committee has no foundation or framework. However, it has become the practice in multi-sectoral elections preparations. Chief Justice Martha Koome will not be the first to chair it. It's neither the first time the judiciary is represented in this committee. This multi-sectoral team was formed after a meeting attended by all its current members. Players are well aware of its mandate. Does its existence take away the independence of the IBC? Is the main issue here the presence of the Chief Justice, or the fact that she is chairing it? Let us dissect all these issues surrounding this committee tonight with my guest, the Executive Director of the Center for Multi-Party Democracy Kenya, Frank Mukanja. But first, let us set the scene. The recent move by the IEBC to withdraw from the judiciary led the 2022 Election Preparedness Committee, citing compromise of its constitutional mandate and independence, has introduced a new battlefront in election preparedness roadmap. Our reporter, Jesse Rogers, looks at the current composition of this committee and where we draw the line on the mandate of the IEBC and the multi-agency team.
The National Multi-Sectoral Consultative Forum on Election Preparedness and the Technical Working Committee brings together various stakeholders from ministries, agencies, and departments responsible for the election cycle. The mandate of the committee includes promoting coordination in preparation of the general election, advise government on the requirements for elections, receive and consider reports on election preparedness, among others. The current team consists of Chief Justice Martha Koome, Attorney General Kihara Kariuki, CS Interior Dr. Fred Matiang'i, PS Interior Karanja Kibisho, CS ICT Joe Musheru, CS Treasury Ukuria Tani, representatives from the Office of Director of Public Prosecution, Inspector General of Police Hilary Mutiambai, the chairperson of the Council of Governors, and the CAK Director General Ezra Chiloba, as well as NIS Director General Wachira Kameru. Until recently, IEBC was part of the multi-sectoral agency, which had proposed adjustments to next year's election budget to the tune of 19.3 billion shillings to adequately fund activities in order to ensure a free, fair and credible election.
The forum has adopted the work plan and the reports that were tabled before us in this meeting. The forum has, however, requested the technical working group to further review the budgetary proposals so that there is proper harmonization. There are some items that could have been provided for in the current budget, and there are some items which were left out. But
the elections preparedness roadmap experienced headwinds after the key stakeholder, IEBC, cut ties with the team, citing interference with its mandate. IEBC warning that the continued activities by the team violates the Constitution by purporting to direct the IEBC on how to discharge its mandate. The IEBC bombshell came barely weeks after Deputy President William Ruto's UDA party protested inclusion of CS's Fred Matiang'i and Joe Musheru in the team on what they termed political bias. Key questions arise on whether such a forum previously existed in planning of the 2013-2017 general elections and whether the Chief Justice constituted part of the committee, considering their vital role as a neutral arbiter.
Independence of the judiciary is deep, is fundamental. It cannot be taken away simply because I have sat with other agencies of government, with the politicians. The kind of committee that at the national level that has actually caused all these discussions at the moment, the one that is presently chaired by Chief Justice Martha Koome, was never the same that was chaired by David Kenani Maraga. Maraga chaired the judiciary's internal committee that was looking at how well the judiciary was prepared for the elections.
In the past, judiciary has had its own internal team that deals with issues to do with elections. Equally, where do we draw the line when it comes to separation of powers between the IEBC and the agency with regard to intergovernmental relations as stipulated in the Constitution?
The functions of IEBC are encapsulated under Article 81(4). Those specific functions shall at all times not be undertaken by any other institution. I think the only important thing or the only agenda that IEBC can sit together with the other agencies is to discuss how the other agencies can come in, how they can help IEBC in executing its mandate. We all know and we all agree by law that IEBC is the primary institution that is responsible with conducting of elections in our country. These other offices are there to help IEBC, and that is the extent to which IEBC can have a discussion with them.
Jesse Rogers, KTN News.
Well, the topic for discussion tonight is election preparedness. We have a lot to talk about tonight in the wake of the IEBC withdrawing from that multi-sectoral committee. It's very pertinent that we put context to what's happening. My colleague Eric Latif is already seated with Frank Mukanja, CMD Executive Director. He'll be with you in a minute, but first, let's show you some of the names in that group that are disputed right now. And this is the team that is constituted in that multi-sectoral forum. The judiciary, headed by Chief Justice Martha Koome, the AGCS Interior Fred Matiang'i, PS Interior Karanja Kibicho, and ICT Joe Musheru. However, the contention mostly is with the two, Fred Matiang'i and Karanja Kibicho, and those are the people that are cited by political parties as not wanted in that group. Others are Treasury CS, Ukuri Atani, ODPP sending a representative, not necessarily Nudin Haji. IG Hilary Mutiambai will sit there. Office of the Register of Political Parties is also taking a representative there. But that's not all. Let's take a look now at the other people who are within that team. NCIC, Chairperson of the Council of Governors, CAK Director General, who is now Ezra Chiloba, former CEO, IEBC, NIS Director General Wachira Achemba is also among those who are seated in that committee that is disputed. Let's go about the mandate of the committee: promote constitutional collaboration and coordination for the general election, advise the government on the requirements of the elections, coordinate electoral assistance by the donor community. That's not all. They still have other mandates: facilitate the legal reforms required by the conduct of the general election, facilitate provisions necessary for ICT infrastructure for election, facilitate the investigations and prosecution of election-related offences. And that's why ODPP is seated there. And finally, facilitate the expeditious conclusion of pending election-related cases after the disputes, receive and consider reports on election preparedness, perform any other function as may be appropriate or may be given by the framework of that committee. Now, the reasons I have read that is the reason why there's a dispute, is the reason why the IEBC is withdrawing. Is this the first time that we see the judiciary chairing that committee? We'll find out shortly. But first, let's speak to Eric Latif, who's already seated with Franklin Mukanja. Eric?
Well, thank you very much, Ken. And so let's delve into the conversation with my guest, Frank Mukanja, the Executive Director of the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, Kenya. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Latif, for having me.
There is a lot of confusion here on the committee. There is a multi-sectoral forum. There is a technical working committee. There is one where the CJ sits, one where the CJ doesn't sit. What are all these bodies?
Let's begin with what is right before we criticize whatever we find that it's unpalatable. One is that it is progressive to try to address the challenges that we came across in the 2017 general elections. And it's by and large accepted that the technical operation of the election was quite sound. And one of the main challenges was obviously the coordination of the election management bodies. And this is one thing that the multi-sectoral forum really seeks to do. So in terms of establishing this multi-sectoral forum is a good thing because it goes to serve to improve the efficiency of coordinating management and conduct of the general elections. As to what is challenging with this is the terms of reference, which seem to be stealing the mandate from the IEBC, and secondly, the management, the approach that they've given the leadership and the functioning of the multi-sectoral forum for several reasons. One is the Chief Justice is a judge. And yes, the judiciary is part of the EMBs. But the seat that the Chief Justice occupies comes towards the tail end of the electoral process, which is arbitrating on the petitions that may arise. It is becoming a little bit tricky if you ask the Chief Justice to sit and chair a forum where we are likely to place her views on particular issues because she's been involved in meetings. That is going to be quite an issue of technicalities that are going to arise, and we'll be having scenarios where litigants and advocates will be asking that she steps aside not to partake and to be part of the hearing. And
so let's just go this step by step. So we start by saying that in principle it's okay to have a multi-sectoral forum that brings in all these other government agencies.
Correct.
We're talking about the IEBC itself.
All the election management bodies.
All the election management bodies. This is the IEBC. We've got the judiciary. We've got the security organs coming together, the information ICT agencies, right?
And it is in good faith because an election is a huge operation. There are various functions that IEBC need to be supported to be able to manage the elections well.
Okay.
So having this multi-sectoral forum where all the stakeholders, all those with a responsibility can centrally coordinate is a good thing. It improves the efficiency. I'll give an example. You need security for the ballots.
Yes.
The law says clearly that the police seconds, the police service, National Police Service, seconds police officers to IEBC. the same law says these officers will not report to the commanding officers, but will report, their commanders will be the presiding officers and the returning officers, for purposes of making sure that the independence of the commission is safeguarded. And therefore, if we must have the multi-sectoral forum, which we should, and it's a good thing, then the idea of the Chief Justice chairing it is not a good idea.
Is the idea of the Chief Justice being present a good idea? Being a member of the committee?
It is a good idea for the judiciary to be there. It is a wrong idea for the Chief Justice to be there, because that is the excuse that is being used, that the only reason we've been given why the Chief Justice should chair is because of seniority. If it's a question of seniority, why can't we then have an officer, a senior officer, that can play second fiddle to the IEBC chair, someone like the registrar of judiciary?
Let's look at the members,
yes.
Okay? So we've got the IEBC represented by the head of the IEBC.
Yes.
And that's the chair. We've got the Attorney General's office represented by the head of that office, the Attorney General. The police service represented by the head, and this is the Inspector General of Police. When you come to the ministries, we are seeing the head of the Treasury, the head of the Interior and Coordination of National Government in charge of the Ngaos. We're seeing, when it comes to ICT, where the Communications Authority sits, we've got the minister. What's wrong with having the head of the judiciary?
It's because absolutely out of the functions, all right? The support that the Treasury gives to IEBC is about budgets, and at any level, that is fine, but you have a responsibility that you are the final arbiter of this process, that if the elections are challenged, then they will come to you, and that is the real thing. The idea of the judiciary being involved is not a bad idea, because there are issues as an election management body the judiciary has to respond to. But the elephant in the room is the direct involvement of the Chief Justice. And Makiu, the only reason we've been given that he must chair, it's because of seniority. If it's only about that, why can't we have, because we're talking about institutions, not individuals, why can't we have a senior officer like the accounting officer, the registrar of the judiciary, taking part in those meetings, so that allow the IEBC, and the committee would make more sense if IEBC chairs it, not any other body chairing it, when they are really looking at the functions that IEBC should be presiding over. Let IEBC do its job. What we need is the support from these other government agencies to make sure that the operations are smooth.
I feel like we are splitting hairs here, Frank, because we're looking at the Chief Justice as the person who will also be the person who sits in the Supreme Court. But we forget the Chief Justice as the office of Chief Justice. And this office is the one that chairs the Judicial Service Commission, is the one that chairs the Committee on Administration of Justice, is the one that represents the judiciary everywhere. The office of Chief Justice, not the judge who occupies the office of Chief Justice. How do you separate those two?
It's a matter of perception. And as long as we are not dealing with these perception issues in politics, they will matter. At the end of the day, IEBC requires to deal with the trust deficit from the public. And as long as the Chief Justice is there and the political class are raising various issues about it, and the IEBC partakes of that process, then they will be perceived to be aligned in a particular way. There is no harm if the judiciary is represented by because the only reason we're being given, Latif, that the Chief Justice must chair this, and we know very well that she will also chair the presidential petitions, is that she's the senior most, and therefore the IEBC chair cannot be able to chair. We're talking about the independence of the office of the IEBC as a commission.
I want to keep like a dog with a bone here.
Yeah.
Because I still want to look at it from the point of, this is the office of Chief Justice established by law and given all these other mandates. Like this Chief Justice said when she was poking water. She said, because I'm the Chief Justice, I am mandated to chair the Judicial Service Commission. Because I'm the Chief Justice, I'm mandated to chair the Committee on Administration of Justice. Because I'm the Chief Justice, I'm mandated to do all these others and coordinate the operations of judiciary and the delivery of justice. Now, if we are talking about a multi-sectoral consultative forum, which looks at, okay, so what do we need to do to organize an election? What is wrong with this office being represented here as the Office of Chief Justice?
It is wrong.
The head of the judiciary.
It is wrong because unlike all the other functions that you have mentioned, that the Chief Justice have mentioned, are supported by a piece of legislation or the Constitution. In terms of elections, IEBC is mandated to preside over the elections, and therefore we cannot be able to shift that. Let her also support it by quoting the Constitution, that the powers that give her that mandate, because the only reference so far that has been given Latif is the seniority, all right? And if it's a matter of seniority, then let us deal with the institution, remove the Chief Justice from this chessboard, and have someone like the Registrar of the Judiciary be there and preside over, you know, and be part of the meeting. So to allow the coordination of this meeting, the chairing of this multi-sectoral forum, to be the responsibility of IEBC.
Let's continue this conversation after we take this break. We're having a discussion with Frank Mukanja. He is the Executive Director of the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, Kenya. And it's about the Chief Justice chairing the multi-sectoral consultative forum on election preparedness for next year. This is Kivumbi 2020. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
KTN News.